Welcome to the fourth webinar in the Queensland AI Hub Medical Datathon webinar series. Thank you for joining us again. I hope that everyone who was participating in the Datathon over the weekend had a good time. We had an excellent first weekend of workshops, lots of exciting ideas coming out of the teams that we had, lots of engagement. So we still have our second workshop next weekend. And we're very excited to see what comes out at the end with the pictures that everyone will be doing and that we'll be judging at the end of the Datathon. If you haven't registered and are not part of the Datathon yet, but you still want to join, feel free to. We are still happy to add some more talent to the teams that we have. So you can check that out on our website, how to join and register at this stage. But without further ado, I'll get to the first of our two excellent speakers that we have joining us today. So first, we have Malcolm from Alcidion. So Dr. Malcolm will be speaking to us about AI in the clinical environment, practical lessons from commercial applications of AI and CDS. So Dr. Malcolm Pradhan is from Alcidion. He's the Chief Medical Officer at this healthcare technology company. He has over 20 years of experience in the medical informatics field and is one of the world's leading minds in clinical decision support. Prior to co-founding Alcidion in 2000, Malcolm was the Associate Dean of IT and Director of Medical Informatics at the University of Adelaide. He was also active in the Australian Health Informatics community as a founding fellow of the Australasian College of Health Informatics. Throughout his career, Malcolm has contributed to the health informatics community and has specialised in research into patient safety, evidence-based medicine, operational analysis and optimisation, data analysis and probabilistic stimulation modelling and Bayesian analysis and modelling. So very impressive background. Take it away, Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Steph. So I'll just present my screen. So sorry about that. I thought I'd given you the shorter version of that. So thank you for all that introduction. And thank you everyone for attending today. So yes, as mentioned, I'm Chief Medical Officer at Alcidion. Alcidion are an ASX listed health informatics company. We have footprints in Australia, New Zealand and the UK, and focusing on patient safety, patient flow, and really trying to improve the ability of healthcare organisations to innovate and to solve complex problems. So my background actually, as Steph was saying, I actually did a PhD. I did medicine at Adelaide, then I did a PhD at Stanford in Bayesian networks and reasoning, complex decision models. And this is one of the networks I worked on many years ago. It still gives me a few shivers when I look at it. But it's not like a deep neural network. It's actually a Bayesian network, which has things like semantics. So you can enter data, what symptoms a patient has down here, and it'll propagate probabilities and help make decisions. And there's all sorts of semantics in this network and around different concepts, etc. So that's kind of the stuff that I was doing, kind of complex stuff back then. And what's interesting is today, many years later, we still don't have pervasive use of clinical decision support, CDS or AI in the healthcare environment. And so I'm going to address that today, really trying to understand, well, look at all the fantastic work that's been happening in improving machine learning, in particular deep models, and the technology we have, yet healthcare still hasn't really adopted at scale the ability to use all that technology. So from an Alcidion point of view, we talk about patient safety, flow, clinical productivity is a really big issue, and we'll get into that. And really, how do you support new models of care? And that's obviously been brought to everyone's attention with the most recent challenges around COVID-19 and how to adopt for those kinds of models. And what we do is we basically we've created a platform which layers on top of existing IT systems, and it really tries to open up data in real time to groups such as yourselves to add AI and algorithms onto clinical data in real time, and that's been our focus. And so I'll go over our experience and some of the issues that we face when talking about improving AI. So as you know, for example, in Queensland, there's a medical record, a big EMR, And that's really designed for data capture, storage, being the system of record. And there's an increasing understanding, particularly out of the US, where they've been doing this for some time, that those systems have been designed as your system of record, and they're not necessarily the most effective way to innovate, in terms of systems of engagement. The analytics, the AI, the ability to use that data in a flexible way. That's not what they were designed for. And so there are other systems that may be needed to do that. And so this is an example of people using EMR. So you've got on the right there a team and three of the team there. There's one doctor with the patient. There's three doctors with their workstation on wheels, but they all have pen and paper because they still need to write things down, because getting access to the EMR to do all the tasks they need is too cumbersome and too difficult. And there's a fifth member of that team running around doing jobs at the same time. So that's kind of healthcare today. And this particular institution's been using an EMR for 10 years. So despite the use of electronic medical records in the US in particular, where they measure it in quite a bit of detail, preventable errors in healthcare are still the third leading cause of death. So something's not quite right. We've invested all this money in technology, yet preventable errors are still a big deal. And the challenges of healthcare are only just starting, because what we're facing, if we ignore COVID-19 for the moment, what we're facing is increasing an aging population. So by 2050, we'll have 4 times as many people over 85 or over 80, which will, and as we get older, we have more comorbidities. We are just sicker. So the cost of dealing with us as we get older grows, the cost of the healthcare. And look, some of us would argue, that's good value for money, even though it's going up. But at a certain point in time, it's quite crippling for the healthcare system if we are to manage everyone as we do today. So the whole point is that we do need different models of healthcare, and that model was really, we thought we had a few more years to debug that model, but it sort of came out last month with COVID, and really what we're trying to do is move episodic doctor-driven healthcare, which is what happens now. You get sick, you go to your doctor, you book an appointment, you might have to wait, you see your doctor, and then they give you whatever treatment. If you're super fancy, and modern, you might have an app that captures data, and then you go to your doctor, right? But really what we need to do is move to a continuous AI-driven model of healthcare, right? There's no choice. Otherwise, the whole healthcare system is going to fail. So this is not just a quirky thing. This is what we need to do. What we need to do is have many different algorithms analyzing, if you've got certain comorbidities, like you've got diabetes or you've got, lung disease or whatever, there'll be different algorithms. So it's not one master algorithm. There's going to be thousands potentially of algorithms monitoring different aspects of healthcare for different high-risk cohorts. And then maybe, helping them get repeats, taking into account their preferences and what they're trying to achieve, and then recommending different resources in the healthcare system to keep them out of hospital. Go to hospital if you need to, but not as a first response, which is kind of how it's used now. So that's where we need to go. So the whole future of healthcare, as we found out in last month, really relies on the ability to run algorithms at scale. So what is the realities today? What's stopping that from happening? And that's kind of what I spend a lot of my time on. So and I'm going to go through this bit really quickly, because I assume you had all sorts of AI talks, but AI is a very big field. Machine learning is a subset. Deep neural networks are even a smaller subset, but that's where all the innovation has really occurred from about 2011, 2012 onwards. So what happened is that if you just look at, say, object recognition on images, the errors on the left there, and you can see that when deep models came in, the error rate dramatically dropped, and has continued to go down. In other words, this is computers recognizing objects within images, like the ImageNet challenge. And human performance is over here. So in 2015 with Microsoft ResNet was the first one that actually got beyond human performance. And there's been similar progress in healthcare in a whole different areas, from lung fields and breast and retina and moles, surgical operations, monitoring patients in a variety of image-related ways. And there's also been some interesting work on looking at EMR data to improve predictions of mortality and readmission. So that's all great, and that's been fantastic progress. And for those of us who've been doing this a while, I was genuinely surprised how far we've been able to get with, curve-fitting models or, such as deep neural networks. It's been really impressive. But on the other hand, we have to acknowledge that they aren't doing what we thought they do. In other words, we thought if we give lots of data to a model, they will understand the domain, right? They'll understand what healthcare is about, or what cancer is, or something like that. And that's not the case, really. And there are a couple of things that have highlighted that. One of that is the brittleness of these models. So these are models which are predicted, trees, birds, vegetables. But if we perturb them a little bit using certain algorithms, we can get them to be completely incorrect, even though visually they look the same. In other words, these models are not understanding what they're seeing. They're recognizing patterns in the pixels. They're very efficient memorizers. And to the point where even recently there's been a paper last year or so where you can do 1 pixel adversarial images. So this is a ship, but if I had that 1 pixel, it's going to say car. And these models can be confidently incorrect. They don't have much introspection. They don't have an understanding of uncertainty in any meaningful way. They will be very confidently incorrect. And there's a whole lot of examples on adversarial. And this is not just for images, it's also for this is a general feature of gradient descent type of networks. So this is a text, this is for natural language processing, and then you ask a question. So, it's a bit of thing about Tesla. Where did Tesla spend Asta's money on? And the network will say, Colorado Springs experiment with 78%. You go, wow, that's amazing. But then you just type the word did, and it will be even more confident, right? So what we found, and what's been found, is that these things are really good at picking up cues in the models. So there are limitations, and recognition does not mean understanding. Descriptive does not mean prescriptive. In other words, we have all this knowledge in healthcare that we aren't following right now. The biggest problems in healthcare aren't necessarily new discovered algorithms. It's actually just implementing what we already know. And the other big thing is explainable versus black box. So I'll leave you, I don't have time to go into that, but there's a really good paper here. I'll send out the slides, but this is a great paper to read about black box models versus explainable models. And if you think we just need large networks all the time, there's a really amazing bunch of work been going the last couple of years around the lottery ticket hypothesis, which shows that actually 90% of the network is not used and not really effective, but it's needed to train. And so I think the models for AI are pretty good in terms of the black box AI. There will be an augmentation system, and it works really well in images in particular, where AI models plus a clinician are very effective. But what are the barriers out there? And the barriers really are interoperability, just getting data out of electronic medical records and other systems, and particular two-way, because it's great, there's no point sending someone an alert to say, hey, someone's might get acute kidney function, but then I have to go and find a computer login, hunt for that patient's ID, and then look at all that data if I can't just click on a mobile device and write that note back into the electronic medical record. So we need two-way interoperability, because time is a really big problem for clinicians, right? If you ask clinicians, if you come up with a magical algorithm, what do you want it to do, to solve your healthcare problems? And I've asked that question to quite a few clinicians. And by and large, junior doctors largely will say, I just want something to help me get my discharge letters written so I can get home on time, right? That's where we're at right now. It's not about, I need to, find a specific molecule in this patient to help them do something. That's not what it is. It's just practical stuff. And it's largely about time, because IT systems have created an additional time burden on clinicians. Data quality is a big issue because doctors and nurses are not used to capturing data for use. They're capturing it as if you like, paper on the computer. So the fact that we're now going to use that data for all sorts of interesting things is a bit of a shock to them. And that's going to, but the only way to improve data quality is actually to use the data to help them with their tasks, right, for automation. So it becomes a cycle that we need to start. The lack of structured data, a lot of it's free text, and irregular data. So particularly deep learning models don't handle irregularly spaced data well. So they're great with large volumes of continuous data, but if you've got lab tests that were done or not, intermittently, because the fact that you don't do a thyroid test on someone has meaning. It means that you don't think they've got thyroid disease. And so that's not easy to represent in deep learning models. As I said, workflow integration is really critical, and trust. Trust is a really big issue. Why would people install all these things if they can't, monitor and trust all of that? And so what we've done is we've built a platform to try to address this. So as you know, I've been doing this a long time. So the My Precision platform is really designed about running AI safely and at scale and decision support. So we get data from all sorts of sources, including EMRs. We convert it all into an open standards format called FHIR, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We analyze what events are going on. We stream those events down an event bus. We cache data because machine learning algorithms and AI algorithms can be very data intensive. You've got to fill up those vectors and shove it into those models, right? So, or even from a rules engine point of view, you've got a lot of queries you do into the data to analyze, what's been going on, etc. And that the host systems, they're not designed for that kind of load. So what we do is we buffer those systems, and then we have a decision support engine that listens for all those events, and we can then run business logic. We have our own rules engine, which I'll talk about briefly about. We have other algorithms, predictive and other algorithms, and we allow plugin algorithms. So we've been working with our good friends at CSIRO at a pilot in New South Wales, where we plugged in one of their AI algorithms, readmission risk calculation algorithms, into our platform to be able to get that output from the algorithm. So that's also been a good demonstration of how the platform is really designed around running your algorithms at scale, rather, because we're not going to be the source of all algorithms, and then we can push those out to devices and UIs. But that's the thing, people, the current products out there have not been designed with AI and active decision support in mind, really. So we've had to kind of build a set of apps and really a toolkit to allow people to construct solutions based on algorithms. So we have a pretty fancy mobile EMR, which is real time from the host EMR system, where we've now got write back as well. So if people acknowledge tests, or they want to send orders, or if they dictate a note, that can go back to the EMR as well. And it's really about speeding up those workflows, because you can't engage clinicians in anything else if you can't save them time. So our motto at Alcidion is every click or tap with the clinician is pushing a friendship. And so with that view, you have to be really targeted on freeing up some of that headspace so they can engage with you. Otherwise, everything else is just a new additional burden. If you say, hey, I've got a great new predictive algorithm to predict this thing that could happen in a month, when a clinician hears that, they're saying, wait a minute, you're now asking me to worry about something that I haven't had to worry about before that might happen in a month when I can't get through today, right? So after 20 years of doing this, my view is until we can get people through the day, we can't engage them on what might be coming down next month. We also have a toolkit of web-based UIs that people can construct different dashboards for different cohorts of patients. So, looking at cardiology or neck or femur fractures, what is the key information that you want to surface? And we do that on the mobile device as well. For that specialty, what do you want to surface? Because don't forget, in healthcare, each specialty, like cardiology or renal or respiratory or, breast endocrine surgery or whatever, or ICU, each of those is a different business and has their own different concerns, and we keep buying, solutions for the whole hospital. So it's cumbersome for them to get to the data they need to solve, the kind of problems that they're concerned about. And the bottom one there is interesting, which was the home care stuff, some stuff we're doing here in South Australia. We're integrating device data from home, and we keep track of that, where all bits of the data are from. So at Alcidin, we've got a platform that's actually designed around monitoring data quality, around auditing algorithms, measuring algorithm performance. So we're doing all of that housekeeping because there's so much of that just has to be in the infrastructure just to be able to run your little algorithm safely and for people to trust it. Right? There's a lot of work to be done just to get to that point, and that's so. And we don't believe that, and it's taken us a lot of skills. Like, we've got many years in this to kind of pull all that together. So it's not something that a startup can easily do. So we're trying to create an innovation platform that others can plug into, because that's all we have. We can't triple the amount of hospitals to support the future of healthcare, right? So we've only really got innovation. And for our own internal use, we use largely explainable models because it allows the clinicians to walk through those, and they're more prescriptive based on evidence rather than descriptive, what's gone in the past sort of stuff, just because that's where people are at the moment. We do use some advanced models in occasion. We do a lot of work in NLP, which I'll show you a little demo. And we do black box for non-clinical. So in other words, we do fancier models for things like predictive algorithms for occupancy and length of stay and stuff like that. This is a good example. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. This is a good example of how we're able to put something together for the COVID response with one of our customers. So we created this very COVID specific dashboard. So you can see, it highlights if you're between day 6 and 10, because that's a high risk period. The decision support then increases the frequency of appointments to call if the patient hasn't entered their symptoms in a mobile app. We track the symptoms, which symptoms are new, which symptoms are more high risk. So it's very domain specific, and we didn't have huge amounts of data to learn from. We had to go through all the peer-reviewed tweets, which everyone was doing, and come up with a model with the clinicians that they were comfortable with, and then they could automate their workflow. So people had monitored devices. If something was going wrong, the virtual care nurse would be informed. They could easily, with the tap of a button, send a referral up to the clinician, a respiratory clinician, who could look at that data on their mobile phone. And all this was being monitored using decision support in the background. And it took about a couple of weeks to pull all that together. So you can, and we're doing some fancy stuff with notifications. I won't spend too much time on that, but just contextual, taking into account a lot of the patient context to make sure that the escalation of these alerts and notifications are relevant to the clinician, and also doing some work for them, like pulling out, we use a knowledge graph to pull out what's relevant for that patient. What does the doctor want to know? And then we do some stuff with natural language processing. This is an example. We do this on, say, notes that are being written in the EMR that come out, but we also can do it in real time if that's what people want. So as you can see, we're pulling out key concepts, including negations and stuff like that. So that's a pretty powerful thing. And then we can use that to trigger off algorithms, or you can use those concepts, because yes, you've got word vectors, but ultimately sometimes you just need to know, have people actually entered certain concepts. And as I said, we do predictive algorithms to do with patient flow and ED occupancy and stuff like that. But again, we're collaborating with CSIRO to plug in their algorithms. It's kind of not, we do this for our customers, but it's not necessarily where we spend all of our time. So we've got some good stuff out of the box, but if someone comes up with a better algorithm, great, just plug it in. That's fantastic. So that's kind of a really rapid dance through, I guess, the experience we've had with clinicians and with hospital systems out there, which is really based around some very practical issues. And while AI and all that I've got is a really important part of the future, there are many steps to get into place, and including interoperability being a key one, to make that all a reality. And we're trying to do our part in that journey. So I think, is that my time, Steph?
Yeah, right on time. Happy for you to go for another minute if you need to wrap up, though.
No, I think that's good. I'll hand it over to questions.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much. It was a fascinating talk. It was brilliant. And I particularly love to hear that, you as a tech company are really engaging with the clinicians and, having that back and forth to, figure out what's actually useful. Because I think, it can be easy to create all these fancy tools using the data, but finding out what is it that is actually needed is so important. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a really good point, Steph. I think sometimes what happens is that, particularly when you've got some advanced tech, you got this hammer, and then you start looking, well, what can I solve? And sometimes, and I admit that's kind of my initial approach many years ago. But as you engage with clinicians and see what problems they want to solve, and then what are the practicalities of trying to implement that in their workflows, those are the really key barriers. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, just want to let the audience know that we are open to questions. But yeah, I think that's what I was going to ask is do you usually, if you're thinking about creating a new tool, do you first come up with an idea based on the data you have, or do you sometimes, get an idea of what tool to start looking at building from speaking with clinicians?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess what we do is we look at almost like product enhancements from feedback, but then, and one of the things I sort of realize is that clinical people are so busy, so they're not that great. They kind of maybe don't know what they need, but they know what they don't like. They will edit things and say, well, I don't like that. But so what we've developed is a platform where we can kind of rapidly prototype these things including mobility or other kinds of visualizations, and then get feedback. Because until a clinician sees their own patients with that sort of whatever you're doing with their own data, it's hard to engage them. It's too abstract for them, and they're very busy. So yeah, so we will actually come up with a variety of ideas just based on what we hear from around the UK and New Zealand and Australia, where we do most of our work. We'll pick up ideas and trends of what's going on, and then try to sort of test it out with our customers or people that we work with to say, hey, what do you think about this?
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a very exciting environment to work in. Once you've got that clinical engagement, it's just getting to that point is a bit of a barrier for startup companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some good questions coming in. So
Okay.
Let's have a look. So Kelvin Ross says, hi Malcolm, we spend lots of time building models on clean data. But in production, what must we do to handle all data, even when missing and not clean?
Yeah, look, that's a really good point, because we come from the models often require quite a bit of clean data. I'm just going back to this slide over here, and so one of the things that once you have your data set, you really, and we know this, we have to really get a large amounts of real world data. But the other thing that is a trap is getting snapshots of data at a particular time, because as the data is flowing through, it goes through different life cycles. So for example, what happens if you're using like a laboratory test to trigger some algorithm, and then that gets deleted, or it gets revoked because it was an error, things like that. But also the noise in that data, or the incompleteness. So and it's particularly with black box models, it's quite tricky to be able, you have to just test them a lot because they will pick up certain patterns in the data which may not be very generalizable. So unfortunately, there's really not a short, but also going through a proper process that you're not putting stuff into production. And we do that with our platform as we go through, a versioning sort of system where you can actually, test it out. So making sure you test it on real feeds before you put it into production is absolutely essential. It needs to be verified and go through all sorts of the test cases that, that you really want to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we have another question from Christine Jackman. So she says, could you speak a bit about the challenges of data privacy? If a patient shares data for their own care, are they necessarily aware, or should they be aware of how it may be used otherwise? Has this presented challenges?
Yeah, it's thank you. It's a very big topic, but the way it works, I guess, is that we don't own the data. We work with our customers with the data that they have captured around as part of their care provision to patients. So and usually that's part of part of the agreements. You know, that there are governance processes around that, and usually this is a quality improvement. So as a company, we don't take data from customers to work on our own stuff. We work with them on their data, but it is very and that is kind of covered as you would expect in a quality assurance sort of model. But it's a very different case if we were trying to monetize a specific model and then taking that, then there's obviously a whole other set of privacy concerns that come in to that. So again, it's a beyond the topic for today, I'm sure, but yeah, it is at the moment we work with customers and we're not monetizing those models out, commercially distributing that outside of those customers.
Yeah, there's a number of papers even just on the topic, which are quite interesting. So, but yeah, I could go on about this for a while
I'm sure,
as well, but I won't.
Okay.
But it is something very interesting to consider when we're talking about this topic. And then just time for one last quick question. So, how easily can you estimate the cost for a health system of producing a digital solution for their organisation?
Yeah, again, a really interesting question because. For example, until middle of 2018, hospitals were getting reimbursed for errors, for example. It wasn't until the hospital-acquired complication stuff came in that actually put financial drivers against errors. So healthcare funding is a really complex area because we don't really measure productivity well. We don't, it's not always clear where the dollars are coming from, but there are some areas around safety. We do some stuff with trying to improve clinical coding, but again, that's kind of indirect. So around safety and around, managing length of stay to make sure people, things don't blow out. So you might have a great idea about saving lives, but actually if the model, finding that healthcare model and funding is and a sustainable funding model for that it can be challenging. Absolutely. And sometimes the clinicians aren't the best people to know about that because they don't deal with all that side of the business.
Yeah, it's more operational.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we have to leave it there, but thank you again for.
Okay. No, you're welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation, and happy to take any other questions by email in the future.
Yeah, excellent. So any questions we didn't get to answer, we will pass them on and get them answered for you to the audience. So thank you. We'll leave it there and we'll move on to our next speaker, but hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so now I'll introduce our next speaker, Clair Sullivan, who has joined us. So Dr. Sullivan will be talking to us about the singularity, the promise of artificial intelligence in healthcare. So Dr. Sullivan is the Chief Digital Health Officer at Metro North Hospital and Health Service. She's a Senior Staff Specialist in Endocrinology at the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital in Brisbane. She is Co-Director for the Healthcare Innovation and Transformation Excellent Collaboration, Clinical Excellence Division, Queensland Health. She has been appointed at the University of Queensland and is widely published in clinical informatics and serves on several national advisory boards for digital health. So thank you, Claire. I'll let you get into it. Or we'll just need you to unmute there. I think you're muted.
Right, there we go.
There we go.
So hi everyone. So 20 minutes, I think, is that correct?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, right. So hi everyone. It's always hard doing it feels like a broadcast or reading the news over the screen, but look, thanks so much for asking me to talk today. I got a call really asking me to talk about artificial intelligence, and this is something I'm spending increasing amounts of my time talking about. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about the future and also how we might get there safely. So AI is controversial at the moment. For those of you who watched the episode of Four Corners last night, that did nothing to dampen the controversy around artificial intelligence. So what my plan is today is to talk you through the steps towards actually implementing artificial intelligence, and to talk about the governance and how we might work in the future. Because it doesn't matter how brilliant your algorithm is. If you really want to make a change in healthcare, it's all about clinical governance and implementation. So we'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon. I think we are at a point in health which is similar to perhaps previous industrial revolutions. So when you think about the way in the first industrial revolution that steam changed the way people moved around, and then to the second industrial revolution when electricity came into our homes, and for the first time people could watch pictures beamed live around the world or even from the moon, the changes that that brought to the way people think, to the connectedness of people, and to the way that people imagine themselves. So that was a transformative event in human history. What we call the third industrial revolution is when computers made it into our homes. And that meant that we could type things into our desktops, we could email, and we could actually compute things that we never thought were possible in our own homes. What's becoming increasingly evident is that we're now on the cusp of what we call the fourth industrial revolution. And what the fourth industrial revolution is taking the computers and the data and connecting them to humans. So it's really data is the fourth industrial revolution. You only see transformative change with data when it is presented in real time to people who can make a difference. And the fourth industrial revolution doesn't involve really new technology. It just changes what we do with existing data and existing technology. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So it's a bit surreptitious because there's no big invention. It's just using the data in different ways and changing the human behaviour rather than implementing a brand new evident technology. So why are we headed into a fourth industrial revolution? And for those of you who are involved in the healthcare system, we can't keep going as we are. If we keep going as we are with 3 monthly diabetes appointments for everyone who gets diabetes in Queensland, you'd need about 1,000 of me. So we need to work in new and different ways. We need to use real-time data to provide risk-stratified care. And we need to rethink the old 1950s model for outpatients into new governance structures and new resourcing models that use risk-stratified treatment because the traditional 1950s style hospital administration at the moment is going to struggle with the fourth industrial revolution. One of the criticisms of data is really that we don't need any more data and we have more than we can ever analyse. And that's actually true. But whenever you think that you have more data than you need, I'd like you to ask yourself a few questions about your data. Is your data only useful for retrospective research? So have you just collected it for a particular study to answer a particular research question? It's going to sit on your Excel spreadsheet or your Access database, and at the conclusion of your clinical trial, never be looked at again. And I would suggest that that is a luxury now that we no longer have with data. Does your data have useful patient outcome measures, or is it just administrative or funding data? And some of the data that we're seeing, although it uses surrogate measures of patient outcomes such as length of stay, completely ignores really important patient outcomes such as patient-reported outcome measures and patient-reported experience measures. Does your data collection system produce data useful for anything beyond your immediate business need? And I see data like this all the time. And that's when the emergency department decides to collect data on people coming to the emergency department using a particular bespoke system that is really only, I guess, got the vision for treating emergency patients. And the intensive care guys have another system and use their own data sets for the intensive care workflow. And those two groups have never quite, I guess, connected the dots that the patient who comes into the emergency department with a diabetes coma has all of her data collected in the emergency department and then goes to intensive care and has all of her data collected in intensive care, might actually benefit from those data sets talking to each other in real time. So you will start to see that type of thinking starting to pervade people who put in clinical information systems, I hope, given interoperability, although it's alluring, is not really developing and delivering much to us at scale yet. And is your data actually available in an aggregated form to the decision makers to act upon adverse signals in real time? Or are you publishing papers, and we all know this, it takes 17 years on average for new research findings to be translated into routine clinical practice? I think that artificial intelligence has the potential to circumvent that and to actually start to provide decision support in real time so that people can act on the spike in maternal deaths as it's being presented to them, rather than waiting for a retrospective analysis to be presented 2 years later. So talking about artificial intelligence as a solo effort, I think is unlikely to produce scale at change. And instead, I see that artificial intelligence can help us with this goal. And the goal is to become a data-driven learning organisation with a culture of continuous improvement across all aspects of the business. And the artificial intelligence itself is just one tool in a suite of things which help us achieve that mission. So if we are going to shift from isolated clinical trials, retrospective analyses, and point prevalence collections of data into the fourth industrial revolution, where data is available in real time to decision makers, we need 3 big changes. The first is cultural change, and that is shifting from retrospective static performance reporting. So that's when you go to your performance meeting with your boss and you get a PDF with your report on it and you discuss it, to real-time data actually being observed by the people on the floor and acted on. And that requires a real shift from command control performance to what I believe, which is that everybody is coming to work to do a better job today than they did yesterday. And if you can give them their data and some decision support about what happened yesterday, today might be a better day. And you can see the, I guess, tension between traditional governance structures and the idea that if we provide performance reporting in real time back to people doing the job, that improvement cycle will happen at the coalface. I think the other cultural change, and I alluded to this earlier in the speech, is that the data needs to be centered around the consumer. And the data follows her along her journey and isn't tethered to particular geographic parts of the hospital, particular specialties, or particular people. And that requires a real cultural change to think about the consumer traversing the emergency department, the inpatient space, intensive care and rehabilitation, and making sure that the data is centered around that journey and not around the clinical information systems we would like to have. And that is a conversation that's starting, and I'm confident it'll happen, but it is a bit disruptive. But it is essential if we're really going to achieve seamless data flow to fulfill the promise of AI. The second thing that's needed is technical capability. The ability to collect, process and measure outcomes across clinical, operational and financial domains. And again, to link these in a patient-centered common data model. And although the first 2 are important, the third is critical. And this is appropriate structures to allow data access for quality improvement while maintaining privacy controls and appropriate secondary use. So that doesn't mean monetizing patient data, and that doesn't mean unfettered access to the data. And I think Malcolm alluded to this in his previous talk. This is about quality improvement while maintaining privacy controls. And this governance, I think, is starting to evolve, but it's something I'm quite passionate about and that I think it will continue to mature over the next couple of years. And that's because artificial intelligence is an evolutionary process. And you'll see plenty of AI algorithms built that go nowhere because they haven't actually, I guess, gone through the analytics evolution that I'm presenting here. When you think about artificial intelligence, it really is along the evolutionary scale from descriptive analytics, where you have a simple dashboard, and plenty of hospitals and PHNs have these, where you're describing what's happening today. We've got 15 ambulances on the ramp. More mature systems will then have diagnostic analytics. We have 15 ambulances on the ramp because our surgery beds are over by 15%. In a more mature system again, you'll see predictive analytics. We've overbooked surgery by 15%, so it's likely tomorrow we'll have 15 ambulances on the ramp. When you start to apply, I guess, artificial intelligence into that mix, you can get prescriptive analytics. And on Tuesday, it will tell me that I need to book surgery at 89% to avoid ambulance ramping. So we shouldn't think of AI as an isolated algorithm. We should think of AI as a tool in the suite of analytics. If you don't get your basics right, if you don't have your data elements correct, if you don't have your interoperability correct, although you may have an algorithm, it's going to be very hard to implement. So it's always important to keep this in mind. Many of you will be aware, I guess, across HIMSS, which is the globally recognised authority in recognising the maturity of digital health systems. And it's interesting, they're now starting to focus on analytics. And previously, they were all about implementations in the MRAM scale, and many of you will be familiar with that. We have several HIMSS level 6 hospitals in Queensland, but I'm actually interested in this one. This is AMAM, and this is your adoption model for analytics maturity. And most places in Queensland are somewhere between 1 to 2. Some places are up at 3, rarely 4. And really, we do want to traverse this quickly and get up to stage 7 as I've described. So this does, I guess, give you some of the ideas of the steps required to implement AI at scale. So what I'm describing sounds like a lot of work, right? But it's critical, because the reason is not to get distracted with the algorithm. The reason is to provide better quality of care, better efficiency of care, and better experience for our consumers and staff. And whenever I get lost in the technical side, I always come back to those 3. I guess many of you have heard the negative side of AI, and I'm not negative about it. I think it is a critical step in our evolution. But one thing we need to be cognizant of is previous industrial revolutions have the potential to increase disparity. So when you think about some of the workers in the Industrial Revolution who ended up with pretty awful lives at the bottom of mines, you know, we just have to be mindful of this. It's really important that our clinicians and our consumers are empowered with just another tool rather than this fear of being robotised. And I do always talk about AI as it's just another tool, just like my stethoscope or a blood test. It's another tool that we have, so that the clinicians are empowered to use it as a tool rather than being afraid. And one thing that I guess is rarely talked about, and we need to talk about it more, is ethics and the concept of social license. And social license will become increasingly important as the we can do this outstrips the we should do this. And sometimes we can get ethics approval for something because it's experimental and you know, we can do it. But social license, or what the general population would think is acceptable, might not agree. So whenever we are thinking about something innovative, it's always important to think about ethics, but also social license. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more if we get some time at the end. Artificial intelligence alone is unlikely to scale. And we need to invent a new workforce to help us implement and govern artificial intelligence. It is emerging. These roles are critical to scaling and implementing new technologies such as AI. And the role of a clinical informatician is to translate technology into clinical care. And these are usually people, I'm one, these are clinicians from a clinical background who are trained in change leadership, data cycle, clinical governance, safety and quality, and regulatory demands. And this role, I think, is going to be the trick to scaling and the trick to acceptance and the trick to ensuring that we remain within our social license. This is a workforce at the moment that's severely underdone. We don't have enough people with these skills working in hospitals, in residential aged care facilities, in our communities, in our regional and remote areas. But I've just come off another national meeting where we were talking about supporting this workforce. And I think for the AI community, this workforce is going to be really important partners. We're nearly out of time. So I do love the hype around AI and some of the scaremongering. So I thought I would just show you a little video that really typifies some of that. So hold on while I get this to play.
1,000 years from now, what will the future look like? You're about to find out. A singularity is the point where a conscious artificial intelligence is created and it's smarter than people.
We will use science to begin the process of slowing and perhaps even stopping the aging process.
The idea of using computers to simulate the world is just kind of the next logical step. Maybe, as some people have said, the last one.
It's these next 20 or 30 years that we are really plugging the brain into the internet.
We would become the gods that we once feared and worshipped.
This is The Road to Year Million. A brand new series starts 2nd of September on National Geographic.
We've lost. It's the robots can have the planet.
I do love that one about the robots can have the planet. Some days I feel that way, but it's nothing to do with AI. So I'll stop. I think we're out of time, but I really, I guess, just wanted to summarize with a few key messages. We need to remember that data is the foundation and it's centered around a consumer. We use that data to improve care within the constraints of the legislation, ethics, and social license. And we are rapidly going to shift, I believe, from retrospective isolated analyses to real-time learning. And that's where AI has a really important role to play. Although technology is important, I believe that culture is actually going to be the key to success. And it's important that AI is seen as another tool in the kit bag for patients and clinicians who are empowered to improve care. And I'll stop there on time. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Claire. That was a fascinating talk and very entertaining short little video.
No, isn't it great?
And I think it does show that there is a bit of fear mongering there about AI and everyone always thinks it's going to be robots taking over the world. Hopefully we can show them that it's that's not exactly how it's going to be. So I will open up the questions from the audience, but I just wanted to start with a question. So, you know, I think you're right in that the culture and the education for the people who are important in integrating AI into healthcare is vital to its success. And so for clinicians who, you know, they may hear about this and be very keen to get on board with it, how can they do that? You know, are there enough avenues and programs currently in place, or what might a clinician who thinks, this is brilliant, I want to get involved, but I have no idea, what's the pathway?
So there's not enough pathways. So that's just what my meeting with the Australian Digital Health Agency was about. So we don't have enough. So we are setting up at the moment a graduate certificate in digital health at University of Queensland, for example, and I know QUT is doing the same. So the universities are coming up with, I guess, some formal courses. But it is going to be about finding like-minded people. This is a pioneering industry at the moment. And whenever I struggle thinking about how to progress, I go back and look at history. You can probably tell my dad's a history professor, right? And when you look at the pharmacy, so when you look at medicines, when they started out, each doctor was building their own medicines and sending it to compounding pharmacists, and the pharmacist then made bespoke medicines for everybody. There was no post-marketing surveillance, there was no governance, everybody just kind of did whatever they wanted to. And then came in that industrialisation step. So we had medicines regulation, we understood a framework, we had specialist pharmacists. So I think we are in the AI industry still at that bespoke, let's make it for each clinician, but I think we're going to very quickly see it shift and see the cultural shift and the expectation that when we implement AI, that there's a framework around it, that there's post-marketing surveillance like we do for medicines, that there is a framework that vendors will be able to follow with confidence. And we just don't have that in place yet, nor do we have the educational pathways to form, if you like, the digital pharmacists or clinical informaticians. But that's coming. I think we'll see those pathways become clearer over the next 2 to 3 years. And I think we'll start to see those frameworks for the vendors being developed actually pretty rapidly, probably along the same time frame. So I'm entirely optimistic that this will accelerate.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I guess it's sort of an emerging space. And I mean, you know, we are running, for example, the Datathon now. So I think it's been great to see we've had a good amount of clinicians engage in that. And, you know, that is a starting point. But, you know, I think I'm conscious of supporting how to support them in moving forward in their engagement. Yeah, fantastic. So let me just check if there are any other questions. No, not many questions from the audience today. It was a brilliant talk, and I think you covered a lot of fantastic detail. So that was brilliant. But thank you very much for joining us. We hope to have you back again, maybe at the Queensland AI Hub to talk. And yeah, we appreciate your talk. And I'll have a look into if we can get those slides maybe for the audience. If you want to look into those more, that would be great.
No problems. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent.
Good luck.
Thank you very much, Claire.
See you,
See you
bye.
later. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that ends webinar 4 of the Queensland AI Hub Datathon Medical Datathon webinar series. Thanks for joining us again. We do have our final webinar on Thursday at lunchtime again. So we have Russell Duncan from Telstra, so that will be a very interesting talk, as well as Idis Wong, who has been a mentor in the Datathon. So some great speakers there. So hopefully you'll join us at 12 o'clock on Thursday. Otherwise, have a good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.